So good afternoon, everyone. This afternoon, we will just go through again what we have done with the shamatha, and then move on to the fourth of the Brahma Viharas, which is that of upeksha, or equanimity, even-mindedness, impartiality, and then open it up for final questions. So, traditionally, of course, shamatha is something which, as I said, the intention is to make the mind into a serviceable tool, which we then can use to cut through all our delusion. It is it makes it a very sharp weapon also to cut through all our obscurations. And so traditionally, then there are ever proceeding deeper levels of shamatha meditation, leading eventually into what is called samadhi, where the mind is completely without thought, but completely open and awake and totally concentrated. But that takes time, and normally it takes certain conditions, especially silence, because there shouldn't be any external disturbances, albeit there might be internal disturbances, which one has to work through. So nowadays, in general, the deeper levels of shamatha practice are not emphasized, mostly because the conditions are not right, and because it does take time usually, especially because people's minds nowadays are so busy that it takes quite a bit of effort to get them to really quieten down to the level where they go into a really very deep level of samadhi. But nonetheless, the good news is that this is not really necessary, and that one can nonetheless attain to very deep levels on the path without the necessity for so much prior training. But some shamatha is important. That we have the mind, even if you're not in a state of non-thought, that's not important, because, as we said, the thoughts themselves are not the problem. But we need to really have the ability to concentrate and to have at least a surface amount of calm, that the mind isn't totally turbulent and that we're not totally immersed in the ups and downs, the waves of the mind, that we at least have some distance from these waves so that we can observe them without being endlessly tossed about. That much is very necessary in order to gain any access into other levels of insight meditation. So therefore, traditionally, for example, on the Tibetan path, the first thing that an aspirant would be told to do would be their preliminary practices, like 100,000 prostrations and Vajrasattva meditations and so forth. But nowadays, many lamas are saying, and then after that, having done a few rounds of those, then one would be told to do shamatha. But nowadays, the lamas are recognizing that to try doing any practices, including the preliminary practices, with such a distracted mind as most people have nowadays, that it doesn't really work. And so therefore now they are much, again, various lamas are saying, first you do shamatha, then you can do preliminaries, then you can do shamatha again. the idea is that any practice is what we do. If our minds are totally unsteady, like a candle, just like this in the wind, we don't get focus. And any practices which we do, unless our minds can rest on that practice, at least, even if not completely merge with the practice, at least rest on it for a certain amount of time, it's not going to work. This is the problem, that if we do any practice with a distracted mind, it can't bring forth any genuine fruits. So therefore it's important first to get the mind at least settled by whatever practice, to get the mind so it just can rest on whatever is the particular object that you are focusing on. So for this reason, nowadays more and more lamas are appreciating how important a preliminary practice of shamatha is. Also because then if our minds are able to rest on our object of meditation, our subject of meditation, then, we do get genuine results fairly soon, and then we're encouraged. We thought, oh wow, this really works. I can actually, this does work. And then we feel, oh good, and then we want to go on and on. If we take a very distracted mind to the practice and nothing really much happens as a result of this, we're always struggling with our mind. There's the object of meditation, and there's the mind, and it's going everywhere around it, but it's never really hitting it. Then we just end up feeling that we can't do it. It's too difficult. But this is not true. It's not too difficult. It's just that we haven't yet made our minds workable enough to be able to settle. It's a matter of settling the mind. And this, because our minds nowadays are real butterflies, and we're encouraged. This is the tragedy of our present age, is that we're encouraged to have a distracted mind, as if this is a good thing. To have a short attention span and do, 6 things at the same time is regarded as being a sign of accomplishment, instead of recognizing that you're just totally trashing your brain, stressing it out. The whole thinking process becomes extremely superficial and liable to many mistakes, as nowadays neurologists and psychologists are discovering. I was just reading an article about this whole problem and how it affects children, of course, also, because they're being brought up in this culture of short attention spans, and they don't know how to go deep into any genuine topic anymore. It's all very surface mind. It's a whole different area of the mind that's being utilized than used to be utilized before, when people had time and space to just, absorb what they were reading or thinking about. So in a way, the shamatha practice is reprogramming the mind again to have more time, more space, just to settle in on one topic and go deeper and deeper and deeper into that. And so, after the initial problems of dealing with our distracted mind, it's a tremendous rest cure for the mind. The mind finally can rest at ease. So even if it's only for a short time, it is very helpful and very kind to our poor, overworked mind, to give it a thorough rest. So we will now remember these stages. So, as I said, the important thing at this point is simply to get the focus. To not strain the mind or force the mind to be concentrated. That's not what we're doing. We are resting the mind, relaxing the mind, allowing the mind lots of space. Suzuki Roshi said that the best way to tame your cow is to give it a wide pasture. But the cow is still tethered, right? It doesn't mean that it can just roam anywhere, but it means that rather than keeping it on a very short string, so it gets trying to pull away a wider pasture, so it roams around and then it settles because it's eaten enough. One time when I was in Lahul, in this cave, during the summer, there was an old shepherd who would sometimes bring up the sheep from the villages. He would go around collecting all the sheep from the villages, and then he would bring them up. And then he would, there was a kind of plateau, a meadow below the cave. So he would bring the sheep up there, and then he would go up on this kind of boulder and lie out with his bottle of beer, his bottle of chung. And the sheep would scatter around and start feeding. And then eventually, by the end of the evening, they would just settle down quietly. And then as evening came, he would round them all up and take them down. Now, the shepherd was watching those sheep. I mean, when I say he was lying out, which he was, very relaxed, he wasn't asleep. If a wolf had come, he would have been down there in a moment. If one of the sheep had strayed too far, he was up and getting it back again. But he wasn't interfering with the sheep. He was just letting the sheep roam around and then feed, and of themselves, they settled down. And then one time he must have been sick or had something else to do, and this younger boy came up with the sheep. And so, of course, it's a big responsibility. If you lose a village's sheep, you're in real trouble. So he was very, very nervous. And he kept all the sheep in this tight little bunch. And he spent the day running around. Every time a sheep tried to go off, he would push it back again. So the sheep were all in a nice big bunch. They couldn't eat. They ended up very nervous. And the boy was exhausted. And finally, at the end of the day, they all staggered back down the hill again. Now, it's true he didn't lose a sheep. But probably they were very hungry, miserable sheep that he took down. And watching the difference between how he dealt with his sheep and how the older shepherd dealt with it, I thought this is very like the practice of watching the mind. We can sit there watching the mind, pouncing on all the thoughts as they come up, keeping them all in order, watching them scrupulously, never allowing anybody to stray, and keeping a tight hold on how the mind is doing. And that will keep the mind sort of in order, but it's very exhausting. And at the end of the session, you're more tired than when you started. Or one can just allow the mind to go off in any direction it wants. There's no particular direction. And you don't have to do anything. The mind will just wander around all up and down and all over. All one has to do is observe it. That's it. You just sit back with your metaphorical bottle of beer or your wine and just watch it, playing its own games. And then eventually, of itself, because you are just having this very relaxed watching, not uptight, looking at every single thought that comes in, but just in general observing, the mind settles down and gradually gets slower and slower and slower. So this is the point. When we are observing, when we're observing the breath, when we're observing the mind, we do it from an attitude of focus, but of real relaxation. You know, we are not pouncing on the object. We are just quietly, gently observing. And so we start again with just the breath to bring us into the present, to get us centered. And as I say, this is a practice not just for formal times, but during the day. Whenever we have a few moments, we're waiting. Even, you know, if you're driving, then at the red stop signs, you know, the red stop signs are also a mini retreat. You know, breathing in, breathing out. In Delhi, before they used to, on the red stop signs, they had these white letters saying, relax. So this is it, you know, this is a relaxed time. Or during even the busiest days, there are times of transition, there are times when nothing at that particular moment is going on, when we can spend a few moments reconnecting with the breath, or if we are very hurried, also on the opposite side, if we are very stressed out, if we are very tense and you know, all uptight, again, breathing in, breathing out. Just reconnect. 3 breaths, consciously breathing in, breathing out, really does help. It's so simple, but it really helps to bring us back into the moment, into our center, into the present. And then, as much as we can remember to do it, to bring ourselves looking at the mind. What in this moment is our mental state? What thoughts are happening at this moment? Gradually becoming more and more conscious. When there are negative thoughts, then observing there are negative thoughts. Accepting they are negative thoughts, but then how to make them more skillful, how to change that negative thoughts into something positive. Not just getting swept along by negativity. So our daily lives are the practice, really. If we don't bring the two together, then nothing really is going to really transform inside us. We have to make our daily life into our Dharma practice. Cultivating kindness, recognizing every single person we meet in their heart wants to have well-being and doesn't want to suffer. Wishing everyone well. If we don't have to say anything, but in our heart we are thinking, may you be well, may you be happy. Whoever. People annoy us, taking that as the opportunity to learn forbearance and patience. Poor people are not an obstacle for our generosity. Learning to be more careful with our ethical conduct. Living a life of harmlessness which causes no harm to anyone. With our body and our speech and also in our mind. And trying to become more centered during the day. More conscious, more awake. So that our time with our family, our time at our jobs, our time in our social life, all our day becomes our practice. It's obvious. Then, whoever we meet, there's no problem because they're teaching us something. Everybody we meet is teaching us something. What can we learn now? What lesson do I need at this point with this person? Especially people who are difficult or challenging to us. Really, it's very true. There are no obstacles to practice. There are only opportunities. Maybe it's not the practice you were planning. It's got to be a different practice. But it's a practice, all of it. The Buddhist path is about growing up. The Buddha talks about ordinary people and calls us the childish. And so the whole path is really about becoming adults, growing up. And particularly as far as our emotional life is concerned. Outwardly, we don't need any help. We all grow older. But inwardly, how are we doing? You know, those of you who have been parents, you know, a child of 4, if you give them what they want, happy, happy, happy. And you thwart them in some ways, you don't give them what they want, you take away what they want, then they're in a state of total trauma. Screaming and shouting and crying like they're being slaughtered. We all know this. So that's fair enough. They're only 4 years old. They don't know how to deal with their emotions. Although 4-year-olds actually can learn to meditate and apparently are very good at it and really appreciate having a refuge from their powerful emotions. But anyway, on the whole, 4-year-old, you're forgiven. But by the time you're 20, 40, 60, 80, and still inside, outside, very stoic, inside, when something goes right, happy, happy, when something doesn't go right, anger, frustration, wanting revenge, then there's something wrong. I mean, we need to look how we react when people don't say what we want, don't do what we want. When things don't go the way I want them to go. How do we react? If it's something serious, do we take it on the path? Can we take it on the path? Or do we inwardly still reveal our 4-year-old nature? So the path is, as I say, about growing up, about inwardly becoming more mature, about really stopping thinking everything depends on me. Things are good if they please me. They're bad if they don't please me. That's so childish. So shamatha helps us with this. Shamatha helps give us an evenness of mind that we can see things more clearly how they truly are. And with a less self-centered orientation to everything which occurs to us. And then the Brahma Viharas, of course, help us to reach out with empathy towards all other beings. Not only thinking of my well-being and the well-being of people that I like, my family, my friends, who therefore are an extension of me, but to all beings everywhere. And therefore in that way to get a much larger perspective of what's going on and stop being so self-centered the whole time. So these practices are for daily life. They're not just for something which we do when we're sitting on our cushion. These are really to oil our life so that it runs more smoothly, which benefits ourselves and benefits others around us eventually, if enough people are genuinely practicing, then it will benefit the society, of course. Enough people genuinely practicing, it has effects. So this is not some small thing. This is really a very revolutionary to genuinely practice the path. It transforms everything. So you sit here and you listen and you go, oh yeah, nice. But then when you go home, what? So really, we have to recognize that this is something. The Buddha said first you hear, means that you hear or you read, you study, then you go away and think about it. It's very important to think and reflect on what you've heard, analyze it. Do you agree? Do you not agree? If you don't agree, why not? And so forth. It's important to really not just believe something or disbelieve something because it doesn't fit in with our own preconceptions, but to really look into it and question it and think about these things. Then, if we accept it, if we say, yes, this is right, then we have to do it. Then we have, as one Lama said, first you hear it, then you think about it, then you become it. And that's the point. We have to integrate these ideas with our daily life until we become the practice. It's not somebody doing the practice, we are the practice. Right? Yes, and we all agree. Okay, so we will just sit and I will just revise 2 minutes what we're doing. Again, we breathe. It's very simple. We breathe. We know we're breathing. It's not mental gymnastics. I mean, it's not visualizing somebody with 1,000 arms and how many heads and radiating lights and all this sort of thing. This is very simple. We breathe. And we are aware that we are breathing. Then, when the mind is a little settled, and especially when our mindfulness, our concentration is focused, so that we really feel, that there is a space there. There's the breathing and the knowing of the breathing. Then we turn that attention in onto the mind itself. And if, again, what happens is that it's like there's the stream of thought, and then there's like a space, and then there's the knowing of the thought. The observing, the witnessing of that. The awareness. We are not the thought. The thought stream is going by, we know it. We're sitting on the banks. We're not immersed in the river. So then when the mind is settled and able to just watch the mind stream, then we drop the awareness of the mind stream. Or if we haven't gotten as far as observing the stream of the thoughts, then we drop the breathing. I mean, it doesn't mean we stop breathing, but what we do is we drop our concentration on the breathing. So then we are just in a state of awareness without any object, without the subject-object dichotomy drops away. There is only the subject now. And so then we are just aware of being aware. Okay? Okay, so again, we would just sit for 10 minutes and try this out. This is only just a rerun. You have to go home and try it out for a bit longer time. The important thing is to relax and not worry. I mean, this is supposed to be the answer to our stress levels, not extra stress levels. Okay, so it's very important just to relax and just to rest on the subject. You know, we're here. We are. We're aware. This is what we're aware of. That's all. And as I say, when the mind goes away, just bring it back. No problem. So the last of the illimitable meditations, or the Brahma Viharas, is that of upeksha, or even-mindedness, equanimity. The Tibetans define it as a mind which does not just feel attachment to those who are close to us, to our own dear ones, and aversion to those who are distant from us emotionally. And it means that we are impartial. It's very easy for us, obviously, and it's natural. It's not wrong by any means. But I mean, it's natural for us to feel affection towards our family and our friends, and to wish them well, and to be distressed at their suffering. That is very natural. All animals feel like that. I mean, any animals are loving towards their children and towards their tribe. If you look at monkeys, that's exactly how they are. So this is right, and it's natural. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's limited. And these meditations are to make the mind unlimited. That's why they're called the illimitables. They are immeasurable. So it's not enough just to feel affection and caring for those who we identify with as ours. We need also to work on extending that feeling of caring and empathy with all beings, and especially towards those whom, under other circumstances, we might feel a certain enmity towards. Buddhism is always always talking about, you know, the person who is close and the person who is neutral, and then the person who is a problem for us, the enemy, so-called. And so the practice of equanimity is to have the same attitude of loving kindness and compassion and empathetic joy to all beings. And to recognize that all beings want happiness, they do not want to suffer, and to recognize our common humanity. And not just our common humanity, but our common fact of sentience. Because, of course, as we know, Buddhism isn't just concerned with our particular tribe or our particular human race, but with all sentient beings. Sentient means having consciousness. So that includes just about everything. The other word, apart from sentient, the other word that Tibetans use is drukun, which anything which moves. So that does actually rather exclude plant life. It means anything up, down, as far as insects. It's considered to be anything which moves. But it's considered anyway to be anything which has consciousness, so we can include plant life also. The idea is not to harm, to recognize that even an ant or a mosquito, its own life is most precious. That for a mosquito, its life is meaningful as a mosquito. How do we know what a mosquito feels? Have we ever asked them? And for any being, their own life is very dear to them. They don't want to be hurt. They do want to feel okay. And just to extend that feeling of kindness towards all beings and recognize their right to have well-being and not to be harmed. So that's one meaning of the word equanimity, upeksha. It means that we have an evenness of attitude as much as we can towards all beings, recognizing that all beings are very important to themselves. And the fact that in this lifetime we might not be connected with them, maybe in past lives, from a Buddhist perspective, maybe that was your mother. You don't know. We forget. But on a planetary level, we're all very interconnected with each other. And it's our delusion that sees us as separate beings, unconnected with each other. This sense of interdependence and interconnection is the arising of wisdom, which sees things as they really are, when we stop feeling like we're little solid, independent globules. It's not that we become kind of swimming in a kind of cosmic consciousness, but it's a sense of very deep interconnection with all beings at a very fundamental level. The other meaning of this upeksha is dealing with the ups and downs of daily life. That we have an inner state of equanimity. That we are not thrown up in too much joy and excitement when everything goes right, and then plunge down into deep despair when things don't go the way we want it. You know, it's said that samsara is an ocean, and so oceans have waves, right? And we just came from an ocean in Puerto Rico. And here you must have oceans in Israel, or are they only seas? Nah, seas are not important. What you need is a good ocean to give you the image. You know, seas have little waves. Nah. These are big, tumultuous waves that you can surf on. And for many people, life is like that. You know, they're up and then down again. And so as long as we are immersed in those waves, we are thrown up and then we are pulled down again, continually battered by the waves of life. So what we need is a boat. Right? We cannot at this point completely get rid of the waves. The waves are not the problem. The problem is being tossed up and down on them. So we need a boat. And so traditionally the Dharma was always called a boat. It's the ferry to take us across to the other shore. When I was in Malaysia one time, I saw this T-shirt. And the logo was these big waves. And on top of the waves was a surfboard. and on top of the surfboard was someone sitting in meditation. And then the slogan said, riding the waves of life, be mindful, be happy. That's a great t-shirt. I mean, really, the Buddhist center should get a t-shirt like that. That's it. We're not stopping the waves of life. We're riding the waves of life. And as any good surfer knows, once you get the skill to balance, then big waves are more fun. Right? They look for the rollers. And so that is the point, that, we're not trying to make life completely placid and so that we won't be hurt. But we're learning how to ride the waves so that we're not submerged. And so that we do have that inner centeredness no matter what happens, so that we can ride the waves of life by being mindful. And that quality of mindfulness gives an inner joy. It's very important. Sometimes people imagine that, in order to lead, a Dharma life, everything has to be very smooth, no problems, everything going easy, the company of good friends, and that's it. But really then, as I say, spiritually we just will become flabby, because we have no challenges. So it's not a matter of outwardly making everything pacified and even, but inwardly having the balance that we can ride the waves of life. If you're a surfer, you have to be very aware every moment. You can't daydream. And you're not thinking of, on your surfboard, thinking about previous times on your surfboard, or other people on their surfboards, or anything like that. You are completely focused. This is why surfers get really into being a surfer, because it is an incredible training in mindfulness. And at the same time, relaxation. Because waves of life. And keep an even keel, so we don't plunge back down into the ocean again. And this is this quality of even-mindedness, of equanimity. It's not that we become bland. But we become awake, so that at every moment we are able to see the moment and respond skillfully to the moment without becoming, extremes on either side. That we keep that even keel, but it's riding up and down on the waves. Because otherwise, sometimes we're up, sometimes we're down. And it's exhausting. So this quality of having, viewing everything that happens to us, as we said this morning, really asking ourselves, what is this teaching us? What can I learn from this? What can I learn from this person? Everything is a lesson if only we can learn what that lesson is and absorb it. You are all born here, or you came here to this very interesting classroom. It's in fact not a classroom, it's a college, advanced. What are you learning from being here in this university of life? A university of life and death. What are you taking with you from this? And what are you giving back? Each one of us has that responsibility. to learn and to give back what we have learned. Isn't it? So once we understand that everything which happens to us is something which we can make use of, everything we take it on the path. There's nothing which is not capable of being taken onto the path. The greatest joys, the greatest sorrows, all of it. What can we learn? So this quality of even-mindedness, it sounds very bland, but it's very important. What it really means is just keeping a balance, so that we don't topple over and completely get submerged again. And as I say, also at the same time, this attitude of open-mindedness and impartiality, recognizing that all beings, really, we have so much more in common than we have differences. And in the human realm especially, we're all human beings. That's the most important thing. We're all human beings. And we all have Buddha nature. We all would rather be happy than be miserable. We all care for our families. We all, are working with, trying to strive towards something which somehow we imagine will make things better. Because of our ignorance, sometimes it ends up making things worse, but that wasn't the intention. So that quality of impartiality, this is the Tibetan interpretation of what it means, that we don't just have attachment to our loved ones and aversion towards people who are far. They say, attachment to those near and aversion to those far. That we don't have that. That we recognize our common humanity and we respect and love all beings and wish them well. And there's quite a few of you here. And if everybody really, really sincerely did their best to radiate goodwill, that is powerful. We shouldn't imagine that only darkness wins. In the end, light wins. So the point is to add that bit towards it by being sane. I think really of all you can say about the Buddha Dharma is that it is a religion of sanity. Sometimes I call it enlightened common sense. Because it is common sense, but it's somehow not so common. And it's enlightened because it sees beyond just our ordinary feeble impulses to how things should be and how things are inherently, but we just don't see it very clearly. So it's a path back from madness to being sane again. And so this is not even, in that way, it's not even about being a Buddhist or not being a Buddhist, honestly and truthfully. It's about being a good human being. So it doesn't matter what you believe. Who cares? Nothing divides people like religion, as we all know. What fundamentally, His Holiness the Dalai Lama always says, my religion is kindness. And at the end of the day, that's the point. If we could only just be kind, imagine what the world would be like if human beings were kind to each other. Just that. So, that is not a matter of your beliefs. That's just a matter of opening the heart to recognize our common humanity and the commonality of us all wishing for happiness and wishing to avoid suffering. So if nothing else, please take from this weekend, I will try to be more kind. Kind to oneself, forgiving oneself, making friends with oneself, encouraging oneself, smiling at oneself, and then towards all other beings, your family, your work colleagues, people you know, people you just meet, and in general, just a benign aspect towards everyone, not making divisions. We are all human beings. We all want happiness.